Welcome to the OAST Finance channel and to our new series on inflation. In this three-part series, we'll be exploring the basics of inflation, the history of inflation, and ways to manage inflation. Inflation can have a significant impact on our daily lives, from the prices we pay for goods and services to the values of our savings and investments. It can also affect the decisions we make as consumers and the policies that our governments implement. So whether you're a student, a business owner, or just someone who wants to better understand the economy, this series is for you. In the first video of this series, we'll be discussing the basics of inflation, including the different types, how they're measured, and why it matters. But before we delve deeper into the topic, what exactly is inflation? Inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising, and consequently, purchasing power is falling. In other words, it's when the cost of goods and services increases and the value of money decreases. To gain a better understanding of inflation, let's consider an example. Suppose in 2022, the cost of one egg is $1. If we were to purchase 100 eggs in this time period, it would cost us $100. Due to inflation, however, in 2023, the price of one egg has now increased from $1 to $1.25. This implies that purchasing 100 eggs in 2023 would now cost us $125. To better understand how this impacts your purchasing power, we can look at this example in another way. Suppose that you had $100 in 2022 to purchase 100 eggs. If you were to use the same $100 in 2023, when the price of eggs has now increased to $1.25, you would only be able to buy 80 eggs. In other words, the same amount of money can now buy fewer eggs due to the increased cost of eggs caused by inflation. Now that we have understood what inflation is, how does it occur? There are two main types of inflation: demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Demand pull inflation is when there is an increase in demand for goods and services, which leads to an increase in prices. This type of inflation happens when the demand exceeds the available supply, leading to the demand curve shifting from demand 1 to demand 2, where we find too much money chasing too few goods. This can happen for several reasons, such as an increase in consumer confidence, a rise in government spending, or a decrease in taxes. This leads to a situation where buyers are competing for a limited supply of goods and services, allowing for sellers to raise their prices in order to capture the higher demand. This form of inflation is frequently linked to economic growth, since during periods of strong economic activity, people tend to have more disposable income, which leads to higher levels of spending. Cost push inflation occurs when the price of goods and services increase because it costs more to produce them. This can happen when the cost of raw materials, wages, or other factors involved in production rise. When the costs go up, companies may need to charge more for their products in order to maintain their profit margins. However, because people can only afford to buy so much at higher prices, the amounts of goods and services produced and sold may decrease, leading to a shortage of supply, which can cause prices to rise even more. Essentially, cost push inflation is when rising production costs squeeze the supply of goods and services, causing the price to rise. This type of inflation is often associated with a decrease in economic growth because higher prices can lead to a decrease in demand and consumption. Now that we understand how inflation occurs, how do we measure it? There are several methods used to measure inflation, but the most common ones are the Consumer Price Index, also known as CPI, and the Producer Price Index, also known as PPI. These measures are important for governments and businesses to track inflation rates and make economic decisions accordingly. The Consumer Price Index is a measure of the average change over time in the prices paid by consumers for a basket of goods and services. It's an important economic indicator because it measures the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising. The CPI is calculated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States and by the Office of National Statistics in the United Kingdom. It is based on a survey of prices for a fixed basket of goods and services that are commonly purchased by households. They collect price data each month from thousands of retail and service establishments across the country and cover a wide range of goods and services, including food, housing, transportation, medical care, and entertainment. The prices are weighted according to the amount of each item that the average household purchases, and the CPI is calculated as a weighted average of these prices. This helps us in understanding how the prices of everyday goods and services are changing over time. The Producer Price Index is a measure of the average change over time in the selling price received by domestic producers for their goods and services. The PPI is used to track price changes in the production sector of the economy and is often seen as a leading indicator of inflation. The PPI is calculated by the Bureau of Labour Statistics on a monthly basis, using a large sample of manufacturing, mining, and service establishments. The index is based on prices for goods and services at the first stage of production, before they are sold to final consumers. This includes prices for raw materials, intermediate goods, and capital equipment. The PPI is often used by businesses to adjust their own prices in response to changes in the market. For example, if the PPI for a particular industry rises, businesses in that industry may increase their prices in order to maintain their profit margins. Similarly, if the PPI falls, businesses may lower their prices to remain competitive. Overall, the Producer Price Index is an important economic indicator that provides insights into the price trends of goods and services at the production stage of the economy. Both the CPI and PPI are reported as a percentage change from the previous month or year. For example, if the CPI in January is 100 and the CPI in February is 102, then the inflation rate for February is 2%. This means that, on average, prices increased by 2% in February compared to January. Both indexes are closely watched by policymakers, economists, and investors because it has a significant impact on monetary policy, interest rates, and the financial markets. Now that we understand how it's measured, why do we have inflation, and why does it exist? A moderate level of inflation can incentivize individuals and businesses to spend or invest their money rather than holding on to it. This is because over time, the value of money decreases due to inflation and encourages people to spend or invest their money before its value decreases even further. This increased spending and investment can stimulate economic activity and create jobs. Inflation can also reduce the real value of debt. This means that the amount of money owed decreases in real terms over time due to inflation. This can encourage businesses and individuals to take on more debt and invest in new projects or make purchases they might not have made otherwise. To gain a better understanding of this, let's consider an example. Suppose you borrow $1,000 for a year at an interest rate of 4%. At the end of the year, you will have to pay back the $1,000 you borrowed plus an additional $40 in interest. This means that you will have to pay back a total of $1,040. Let's assume that the inflation rate is 5%, which is higher than the 4% interest rate. This means that, over the year, the general price level of goods and services has increased by 5% and the value of money has decreased by 5%. If you had bought a basket of goods worth $1,000 at the beginning of the year, you will need $1,050 to buy the same basket of goods at the end of the year because of the 5% inflation rate. So, in terms of purchasing power of money, you are paying back less than what you borrowed. In other words, the $1,040 you pay back at the end of the year is worth less than the $1,000 in the beginning of the year, as that is now worth $1,050 due to the 5% inflation rate. Finally, as mentioned throughout this video, inflation can also lead to higher prices for goods and services. While this may seem like a bad thing, it can actually increase profit for businesses and encourage them to invest in new production capacity or expand their operations. This increased investment can create jobs and stimulate economic growth. However, it's important to note that high or unpredictable inflation can have the opposite effect, discouraging spending and investment and leading to economic instability. So what is the optimum level inflation should be operating at? The 2% target for inflation was initially proposed by economist William Phillips in the 1950s and is the inflation target set by many central banks around the world, including the Federal Reserve in the United States, the Bank of England, and the European Central Bank. While the 2% inflation target is not an exact science, it is a widely accepted goal that central banks aim to achieve to ensure price stability and promote economic growth. It strikes a balance between the benefits and costs of inflation while allowing for some flexibility based on changing economic conditions. That's all for today's video on the basics of inflation. We hope you found this information helpful in understanding what inflation is and how it works. If you have any questions or comments about inflation, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And if you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more educational content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.